Welcome in, everybody, and welcome back. My name is Jeremy Toms, host of the Big Law Capitals podcast. It's good to see you. Good to have you in. Thanks for stopping by. Today's episode is a really exciting episode. We actually have Matt Graves back on the episode. That is my business partner with New Homes Capital Management, and also one of my best friends. I wanted to have him back on the show because I wanted to talk to you about the act of running comps. So, if you've never heard of it before, market comparables. It is how you figure out what a property, a single family property, is actually worth. And so I wanted to have him back on because he is fantastic at running comps. Running comps is a skill. And I think the tips and strategies we sort of implement in our business and that we talk about today on today's episode is they're vitally important. And so I wanted to make sure he came on and we had that chat, because for anybody out there who's looking at investing on their own, or, buying a flip or buying a rental, or they're investing in somebody else and they just want to make sure they're doing the math the right way. I wanted to make sure you knew what to look for and what to do and what not to do. So jump in today's episode. I hope you enjoy it. I had a lot of fun doing it. We get into some family stuff as well. It's a lot of fun. And also you can hear about how we actually used the strategies we talked about on this episode to generate $115,000 on one of our flips from last year, actually. So great episode, great content. I'm ready to dive in. Let's bring in Matt. All right, and we're in there. Guys, we have Matt back on the show. Matt, welcome back, man. A thousand thank yous for jumping on with me. How's it going, man?
It's going all right. The other night I had to watch my abysmal Bears, really kind of take one in the chin from the Packers like they do every year in and year out. So dealing with that, but still representing here, and hoping that Justin Field is actually what I kind of thought he was coming out of college. So I'm hoping we can actually steer this thing in the right direction.
So for the audience's edification, so Matt is actually wearing a Bears hat right now, and I wasn't gonna bring it up because I'm a friend and I wouldn't do that. But since you brought it up, man, yeah, I was feeling for you. It's a tough game. That's how it goes.
Yeah.
Well, hey, man, I wanted to bring you back on. So earlier today, we were talking about any number of things that we do, with new homes, right? Like we're building a ton of homes and we're, developing this luxury townhome development, all of our rentals and all this stuff. And we were talking about a couple of the updated values of the properties we're currently building around the Charlotte area. And it got me thinking. And I have this conversation a lot. I think we actually have this conversation a lot with other people, is people really tend to not understand how you go about figuring out what a property is worth, right? So we call it the ARV, or like the after repair value. That is an important number for us, because the overall scope of a deal, you can't really figure out if it's a good deal or not if you don't know what the property is going to be worth after you've done your business plan. And so I wanted to have you on because from the moment we've met and as we've been in business together, I found you're one of the better minds when it comes to valuing properties, right? Whether that's a flip, whether that's a rental property, or whether that's even an apartment building. And I'll make a quick side note for the audience. So we're not going to dive into the valuation of commercial property today, because that's a bigger topic, bigger scope, and it covers a lot more than I think we can probably get in this episode. So that's for another day. For today's episode, we're really just going to focus on single family value, right? So how do you figure out what a property is worth? And so I wanted to have Matt on. Matt, I wanted to kind of chat with you. When somebody's going into a neighborhood, right? Like they're excited about investing in real estate and they're like, okay, I want to go buy a property. What would you tell them when it comes to comps? Like explain the concept of comps.
So, comps, for people who aren't really in the world of real estate, are essentially sold houses in the same general area as the property that you're looking at, that kind of generally fit the same kind of description of the subject property that you're looking at as well. Most of the time, to kind of give a general idea of what I look for when we look at comps, it's really, something, ideally, it all depends also like where you're at, but like how many sales are going on in the area. I mean, I'm here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and there's a ton of sales, so it's really easy to determine. For me, to determine a value of a property because there's always just a ton of sales in the neighborhood. So ideally, you stick to the same neighborhood that you're in because um, a lot of these things are really hyper localized, with certain neighborhoods, even, I mean, it can even get down to the streets, one street versus the next street. So I like to stick in the same neighborhood. Um, and then you're going off of your square footage that your property is, bedrooms, bathrooms. You're trying to basically get the same sold homes as the subject property in the same kind of general like talking about like bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, style of house. I mean, it comes down to like ranch versus 2-story versus split level. All that stuff comes into play.
So what factors in, like, so when you're so like say we're looking at a deal, say in your neighborhood, right? In Dilworth, and you find a house, it's a 3-2, 1,200 square feet, whatever price point, right? But what's when you're looking at say like a comparable, with right, when I say comps, I mean market comparables. So other homes that have sold. I think an important tip on that is when they sold, right? So what would you say, like, if you have a house you're looking at and you're looking at comps in the area, how far back should I go before I stop and say, like, okay, sales after X date no longer matter for my value purpose? What would you say to that?
Uh, yeah. So normally, I mean, I have my kind of preset on my MLS. And for those of you who don't know, MLS is just kind of the standard program for realtors to kind of use to kind of put on listings, and that's just where we view all the new sales and comps and data and all that stuff that comes on the market. But anyways, I have mine preset at 6 months. Is usually kind of what you ideally would want. You could go back about a year, and anything past that is normally not ideal because the market just changes so much throughout that process. I mean, specifically nowadays. I mean, at this point, I would be looking, in the past like 3 months as opposed to 6 months,
Yeah.
just to try to kind of feel out, where
No,
we're
that's a
at.
good point.
Yeah.
That's a really good point, man. 'Cause I think we've seen recently, just with the rate hikes and what it's doing to sort of the how far the dollar can go, right, for the house. And a lot of people, they don't buy for price necessarily; they buy for monthly payment. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I've definitely seen a shift in pricing, not so much in the markets we focus on, like in Charlotte specifically. I think that we've seen a little bit there, but more so in the, I would call, like, the softer markets, right? The markets that tend to be, not the highly appreciating markets. Even those markets have seen, somewhat of a decrease. I think the markets that have, you know, not a ton of volatility, are kind of hanging out there. I've seen a lot more price decreases, especially here in Pittsburgh. I've seen, across the board. I feel like it's a really good time to be a buyer, right? It doesn't feel that way yet to a lot of people, but from an investor standpoint, I mean, you know how this goes, but when we're looking at properties and I can see, it's almost like it sounds bad, but it's almost like a shark, and I can smell blood in the water. Like, I can sort of see if, like, okay, your property before was going 5 days on market and it was out of there. Somebody was buying it, it's under contract. Now it's like, okay, it's been 10, 11, 12 days. Sellers start getting nervous, and pricing starts to kind of get softer, and then then you start seeing price decreases, and that's when I'm just diving in. I'm just like, all right, there's one. And so I've definitely noticed that. So that's a good point to bring up, the fact that right now it probably makes more sense to look at the last 3 months and see what they've been doing. For the most part, it's probably going to be right around where the pricing you know has been, but in some cases I think it's gone down a bit. So that was a real good point. So when you're looking at comps, and let's kind of give an example of something we've done. So we had a flip over in the Dilworth neighborhood where you are, in Charlotte, that went super well last year. And one of the things we did was, when we first bought that, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we bought that in 2020. Is that right? And then sold it 2021.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we bought right at the end of the year there.
Yeah. So And so what was cool about that, and I'll let you dive into the specifics of like the overall property, but the strategy we used was again a simple fix and flip, but it's all about seeing value in places that other people might not, right? Or other investors might not. And so we saw this property had a smaller ish footprint, but in a really good neighborhood. And it was sort of the ugliest house in the street. And from there, we knew like, okay, there's an opportunity. So I'll let you dive into the specifics as far as like size and like what the plan was in order to make it match up with the comps we needed it to get the price point we wanted.
Yeah. So the house we ended up purchasing, it was about 1,300 square foot when we
Mhm.
when we purchased it. And uh, just a little side note: we got this property actually through a neighbor that actually was actually our stager that we actually use for staging all of our flipped houses before we sell and put them on the market. She kind of, she knows what we do. She kind of put us in touch and knew that he was about to sell, and so luckily we got it off market, which is it's just fantastic to be able to slide in before somebody goes on the
That's the
market.
way you want to do it.
Yeah, you don't want to be going up against other buyers in such a hot market, which was at that time was really hot, and so we really lucked out with that. And so we got in there, got the property under contract, bought it. So it was a 1,300 square foot house. So her house, the stager was actually right next door, and they had completely renovated their house. Her husband's a GC, and they actually do the kind of same model that I actually do. They do live in flips, and I think they're up to like 5 or 6 of them now at this point. Stay in them for 2 years, get out tax free. So they've been doing that. They're definitely hip to the game there. And so, anyways, she actually told me that her house actually recently appraised for a certain amount, and so I knew exactly, based on her size, the finishes of her house, and the level of quality that her house was, that we could do that same thing right next door. And so that was just, be able to have that insight, was fantastic, because there's no better comp than the house right next door to where you're building. So we ended up, it was 1,300 square feet. We put a 900 square foot addition off the back of the house, added a master suite back there. It was, yeah. And so we ended up being around 2,100 square feet or so when we were all done, and sold for, I think we set a record in the neighborhood on that one.
With 665,000, is that right?
Yeah, yeah. We actually tend to do that quite a bit with our flips, which was
Mm.
nice. But yeah, so actually that one was a really good one for us, and the stager was actually a little upset because we actually sold more for higher than I actually sold for next door, because they actually sold right before we sold. So
And that one, like you said, that one was fantastic because they had an appraisal done, and it was like, boom, here's the answer to the test.
yep,
Now just do that.
yeah,
Like rarely do you run into that situation, but the point still remains. When you're looking at comps and you can sort of see like look 9 months ahead and see like, okay, if I can turn my house into that, I should sell for that, right? Now you have to obviously account for time, and you have to account for being able to do everything that they did. There's certain restrictions that come with different properties. There can be deed restrictions, anything else, footprint restrictions as far as the layout of your lot versus another lot. But generally speaking, when you're going into a neighborhood to find the ugliest property on the block, in order to get the most value out of it, what you want to do is essentially find what you hope to be is the twin of that property. So that's what we did in that case, and we're doing that consistently. There's a lot of really cool strategies that I think we implement in a lot of different areas around the Charlotte market. I'm thinking about one, Matt, we were talking about earlier today. It's the one over in Gastonia where we found, it's a large parcel of land, and this has actually happened several times, but this one is particular is in Gastonia, North Carolina, where we found a larger parcel of land and realized, okay, this is a larger, raw piece of land that if we split it, there's another house down the street that sold for, I believe, around like 275, 285. And that kind of gave us an idea of like, okay, if we can split this lot and essentially create two identical lots that will then each lot will match up with what that lot sold down the street. We essentially take a raw piece of property that was once for one house and turn it into two. And so, you know, from there it becomes like, all right, let's split this lot into two, build two houses, double our money. And it's it sounds really simple, but again, it's one of those you have to sort of see opportunity when it presents itself to you. And a lot of times that opportunity is not the same opportunity that other investors are seeing. So it's a really cool strategy to use and it's a really cool concept to understand. But again, I don't think a lot of people truly understand how comps should work. I mean, we've talked about this previously. I know some realtors who don't even truly understand how comps um, should be calculated, right, based on what's been sold and what's going on around them. So another thing that it actually applies to and fits well within the show is rental comps. When you buy a single family rental property and you're going in and you're looking at like, okay, what's the overall yield I can get on this property? The same idea applies. And so I'll let you kind of dive into rental comps. And then while we're doing that, I think maybe it makes sense to touch on for a rental, right? Because you're not flipping this. So you're not going to put, unless the area calls for it, you're not putting luxury finishes into this. So, also while we go into it, so rental comps, kind of diving into, focus there, but then also what areas of the rental you should really kind of focus on. And this may also apply a little bit to flips, but more so rentals. I wanted you to kind of dive into like, kitchens, bathrooms, things like that. So I'll let you dive in a bit on just like rental comps and then also like where you want to put your money when you're turning these places around.
Yeah. So yeah, for rental comps, a lot of the times, when we're looking at these things, we get a ton of emails from wholesalers and everything every day from new properties coming through, and usually a quick and easy way to kind of give you an idea about the general rental price that you could get for something is we actually use a website called Rentometer. We got an account with them, and it kind of gives you the quick and dirty about the general area. It gives you a really good idea about the area and kind of some of the other rental comps that have sold or been taken off the market since they've been rented in that area for similar size houses and bedrooms, bathrooms, and all that stuff. So that's just kind of a quick and easy way to do it. Otherwise, like I said, you're still going through the MLS as well as other areas because when it gets into rentals, sometimes people don't go on the MLS and actually post those things. So when you're looking at it, when we look at it, we pull from several different. I mean, we pull from Rentometer, we go into Zillow, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, MLS, like all the above. I mean, we really try to nail that price down of what we can get for the property. And so yeah, so like I said, so when we do that, we're looking for same bedroom, bathroom, general square foot, and finishes really come down, in the properties that we're looking at, whether or not you've got stainless steel appliances throughout the house or,
Mhm.
LVP throughout the house, or is it all carpet, countertops, kitchen, all that stuff. And like you mentioned, the things that, we really focus on when we're turning some of our properties that we want to turn into rentals, is really the kitchens and bathrooms, mainly is kind of what we focus on and really try to just update things as much as possible. We normally try to put stainless steel in everything just because feel like it gives it that edge over the competition. But really, like I said, when we look at rental comps, we're really trying to not overdo it at the same time because you don't want to spend unnecessarily. So we're looking at the comps, seeing what they have to offer. Is it granite countertops? Is it laminate countertops? Is it quartz countertops? Is it, it all depends on the market that you're in. And so you really don't want to go above and beyond if you don't have to get that price that you're looking for, because people are only going to pay what the market demands. So
Absolutely. And we've run into that on so many different properties where, as much as we want to like go with the granite countertops, even the slim granite, right? Like not the thick stuff, not the heavy duty flip granite, but like just the rental granite level. We're like, well, no, that this place it calls for laminate, right? Like it calls for white appliances. It calls for like, just essentially for lack of a better word, lipstick on a pig sort of turns versus like, where you need to really kind of dive into the nitty gritty. We use a lot of like luxury vinyl plank flooring in our units just because it holds up to wear and tear a little bit better. So you're not diving into engineered hardwood on rentals, But I think in some cases you do, right? So I mean, we buy Class A properties, Class B, Class C, and I'll just quickly dive into when I say Class A properties, I mean just think about your higher end rental, right? Like if you had a family of four and you're sort of well to do, but you're sort of in between places as you're building a new house, or if you're doing anything else and you want to commute to work and you just want a place that's nice. That was in my head. That's what Class A is sort of landing you in, right? So you're in a nicer school district, you're in a nicer house. Class B, it's headed towards like workforce housing. It's a nice house, but it's not there's no luxury. You're not really going above and beyond on in the rental unit. It's not something that's going to kind of blow you away. It's a nice house in a nice area. Class C, clearly workforce housing. It's the areas can be a little rougher in some cases. They don't have to be, but they can be lower tier school district. But overall, it's just like that's it's an affordable place to live is workforce housing, and below that, we don't even deal in the Class D space. So, I mean, that's not even. I don't even go look at those units, but the Class A through C, I think that's kind of where we land, and the the calculus for that, as far as if we find a unit that needs again, and I can't say this enough, the ugliest house in the block, that's where the value is. And so when we find those units, we want to make sure that the work we're doing in order to get it up to the level of our comp, that's what we do. Whatever that comp is, we do that and no more. We're not in the game of we're not into the art, right? Into the science. So the art being like over the top. I want to do this and that. I want to make this special mural on this wall. It's like no, you're wasting money. So don't do that. Just do what the next best comp has and move on. It's a volume game. So, well, man, thanks so much for diving into that. There's so much nuance in this game that we play, and I call it a game because like it feels like a game. We sort of get to play Monopoly for jobs, right? We get to make money on like in real life Monopoly. Like we were even talking recently about the 6 unit townhome development that we were doing over in Lake Norman, and this plays into that, this heavily plays into that. We're developing this entirely new townhome development over there, and like in some cases there aren't fantastic comps. You have to sort of like get really creative with the value of these properties and what you think they will be. And so one of the good points that we raised earlier on, not on this episode, but like more so when we were talking about that deal, is the fact that we're talking to local brokers. And so I wanted to kind of get you to chime in because I think people never really tend to realize if you talk to an experienced broker like yourself, there's a lot of really good answers you can figure out as far as comps in a particular area, um, rentals and for flips. And so any advice for the people as far as, okay, this is my first rental, my first flip, you know, who should I be speaking to? Who's going to give me sort of the lowdown? Where should I go for resources on like a particular area to make sure that I'm doing my math right? What would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, realtor. Yeah, you brought up a good point. I mean, realtors. I mean, this is their job. I mean, they deal. I mean, it's all. I mean, if you're not good at comps and you're not good at pricing a house, I mean, I imagine you're really not doing too hot as a realtor. So yeah, realtor is a really good source. I wanted to also mention, property managers is a really good source as well because I mean they really deal with that on a day in day out basis as well. Um, you know, dealing with other people's properties, they tend to kind of recommend prices, and they know based upon how many applications they're getting, what's a good price point, what's low, what's high, depending on how many applicants you're getting and everything. Both of those are really good resources if you're trying to go about rent or rental for property managers and but yeah, realtors could handle rent and or sales. So
We've been doing a lot of like behind the scenes, math homework, if you will, on properties because we're trying to add one more luxury Airbnb before the end of the year, trying to take advantage of the 100% bonus depreciation before it goes away this year, and really 80 next year and 60 the year after that, and it kind of phases out completely towards the end of this decade. And so that's we've been diving heavy on the math as far as finding the properties that have sort of the value add because like Matt, I'm not okay with buying property that doesn't have some level of an upside, which can be infuriating to those we love. But at the same time, it's also like it's so critical and so important to kind of build the balance sheet, build the net worth. And so yeah, we've been diving hard on the finding a luxury Airbnb because there's just and Matt, you know this. I mean, there's a crazy amount of money that pops into our account every month. From the short-term rentals, and like it's just like so hard not to like want to add more and more of those, intelligently to the actual portfolio. So we're working hard to do that. If anybody out there knows of any off-market luxury properties, you know who to call. One of us. Oh man, well hey, thanks so much, dude. As always, a million thank yous for jumping on. To the audience, as always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, at Jeremy Toms. Feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at Big Law Capitalist. It's been a blast, Matt. Absolute blast having you. And until next time, everybody. Peace. All right, we did it. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode. I really, really do appreciate it. Do me a big favor. If you want to be a part of the Big Law Capitalist community to stay up to date with all of our latest episodes, you gotta hit that subscribe button. Super important. But I can't thank you enough for joining me this week. I'll see you next time. Peace.